So, hey Chris, welcome on this podcast right here, the nerdy podcast about mixing and mastering engineers. And Chris, you already made a lot of projects like for huge artists in the world, from Rihanna, Dua Lipa, One Republic, and Glass Animals. So we would love to figure out a little bit about your story. What was your career? And we would love to hear some of your thoughts as a mastering engineer and your career path.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for I think 43 years now, so I've pretty good amount of stories and maybe some knowledge. Knowledge is one of those things today, like people take it or leave it, but you know, I'll try and help.
That's super cool. Yeah, I think at the moment you are on the top five mastering engineers in the world currently. And what's super interesting and important for people to know how to get there. Now, how can you make it to become that huge, get the huge records? But nobody usually knows, okay, how do you start? Because everyone starts from somewhere. So where do you come from, and what was your first take? You started making the decision, okay, I will go for that nerdy sound engineering part. How did it start for you?
Sure. So I've always been a music fan. Like music was always my thing, music and film. And as a kid, I just was constantly like, if I wasn't in school, I was home and I was, playing records on my parents', stereo console, one of those big old things where you put the record in it and, like it was just one piece of furniture with speakers. And I was just into music and like reading all the record covers and, learning about music and bands. And as I grew older, I just kept, my passion for music kept growing and just growing. And when I got out of high school, I wanted to go to school for film. I wanted to be a cinematographer. And I went to one semester of college and realized they don't teach any of that in the first semester. So I was like, I'm not doing this, and I quit. And I just started doing various jobs. Like I was an exterminator for a little while. I did construction. And during that time, I was hanging out with all my friends and bands and, going to shows and doing gigs. And at one point, I just realized, like, I'm not a great musician, but I can really make my friends sound good by, miking stuff right or setting stuff up or like getting the right setup on a system. And I started doing live sound for friends' bands when they played out. And at that point, I was really like, I really want to do this as a job. Like, I don't want to continue, doing manual labor. I want to work in a studio. I want to make music. So I went to a one-year music school in New York City that was called the Institute of Audio Research. It's no longer around. I went there for 1 year. I didn't even graduate. And back then, like, there was no internet or whatever. So I basically told every studio that I went to, I graduated, with no proof, no nothing. And I got hired at a studio called Green Street Recording. I worked there for maybe a year, definitely less. And it was really hard, like going from doing live sound to working in a studio where you would go into the studio maybe at like 6 at night and not come out till 6 at night the next day.
Wow.
Or like, you do 2 sessions back to back and you sleep for an hour, and it became real taxing on me physically and mentally. So I decided to go back to school and maybe try something else. And that lasted about another year of me just fucking off and, doing nothing. And then I finally got a job in a mastering studio in New Jersey where I lived. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then I moved to another mastering studio called Frankfurt Wayne Mastering that was in New York, that I met Herb Powers Jr. and Tom Coyne there, and I became their assistant. And I probably worked for three and a half years there with them, learning under each one of them. And during that time, like when I grew up, in Bergen County, New Jersey, which is like a nice suburb of New York City. And I grew up listening to rock and roll, and I started getting into like punk rock music and alternative music. And when I started working with Herb Powers, he was working on rap music in the mid 80s. And it was kind of like a new genre. And I kind of thought it was really cool because it was like guys were telling real stories about real shit, and there was a beat to it. And what they were saying was like, nobody had ever said like, oh, I shot a guy, I did this, I did that, I sold drugs, I did pit bull fighting. Like, people were talking about that shit on records, and I thought it was just like unbelievably like refreshing and open and like real. So I started really getting into hip hop and working with hip hop music and artists, and everything kind of just took off from there. I became known as like this kid in New York that could master hip hop records. And hip hop in the 90s turned into pop music, and then my whole career changed. And then I started doing pop music and all, everything. It's just, it all rolled out of hip hop, me being there kind of at the beginning of it, and then it becoming really big. And, I was fortunate, but part of the reason why I got there was because all I did was work. Like, I just worked in the studio. I didn't go on vacation. I didn't hang out with friends. I didn't take time off. I just worked. I literally worked. The first 10 years of my life in a studio was 150% dedication to the craft, 24/7. There was nothing else in my life. Nothing mattered. And that's kind of what I feel it takes today. Like, you have to have that dedication. You have to want it more than anything else to really, to make it in this business. You have to have talent, you have to have connections, you have to have, a persona. There's so many things that you can work on personally, but the dedication and the love, the passion for the music is really how you get there. That's the first step. Like, if you're just casually like, oh, I like music and I hate work, I don't know if that's like a good mindset. If you're like, I love music and I don't care about anything else, there you go. That's, you're pressing some buttons there, like that's kind of like what it takes today.
Yeah, because then you don't think about time, you just think about a good result, and you want to just do the thing very good, without thinking about any money, What the most people say, have fun, money will come, that's somehow
and it kind of was like when I started, I was living with a bunch of guys above a gas station in New Jersey. It wasn't a nice apartment, it was kind of crappy, and and I didn't think about money. I just thought about like me being involved in music and making, mastering really good records. And then as, like I said, as hip hop grew, my career grew. And then from Frankfurt Wayne mastering, I went to the Hit Factory. And the Hit Factory is, one of the most iconic studios in the history of music in the world. Like, if you were going to name the biggest studios in the world, the Hit Factory would be in the top 3, I'm sure. So I worked there for 11 years with Herb Powers and Tom. And then I left there and came to Sterling. Tom Coyne had left previously, and then I came here and joined him. And I've been here for 25 years now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you experience, I guess, almost everything.
I have experienced everything, literally everything in the business.
I think
25 years here. Now I'm a partner here. Living the dream, literally living the dream. It's not like people say, oh, you should be really proud, what you've done and, all this. And I'm like, it's not proud. It's like, it's passion. Passion literally drove me here, and passion keeps me here. If I don't want to do this anymore, I'll leave. I don't know what I'll do, but, it's the love of music and coming in here every day and making music in this amazing studio is, there's not a better job in the world. So
that's true. I think a lot of people would exactly say the same to that, because music, when you can do it like for a daily business, it's an amazing job finally. And I think finally your turning point was to exactly take that decision, right? To go to the music industry and do hip hop music. Was it also like your turning point, that decision where you said, okay, I will go for it, I will do that cool hip hop music? Was it in the beginning like your trademark that you can mix and master hip hop music, or what was it? Something
it kind of was like, like I said, I was known in the beginning when I was, really starting my career, like I was into metal and punk rock, and that's like what I loved, but there was no money in that, and there was no money in hip hop when it first started, but all of a sudden I was just doing a lot of hip hop. So that equated to money, and I was like, all right, I could actually, pay some bills. And at 27, I bought a house, and, I got married and I had kids, and everything, went crazy, like just life happened. But my love for the music and my dedication to the business is what I think really mattered. I mean, my ex-wife will tell you it affected my life and everything, but, I mean, I definitely feel it did. There was a point definitely in like the early 2000s where I was working 16 hours a day, 5 days a week, easily. Like I took off weekends to be with my family, but it was pretty much 16 hours in the studio every day. And that literally turned out to be like 5 hours of sleep a night, every night. And I mean, it definitely caught up with me after a while. I just got, like I got to the point where I was like, I'm not staying all night to wait for one song
Yes.
that I'm going to master it. And then later in the afternoon, you're going to change the mix again. So, like I just decided out, you guys can wait till tomorrow. So
Yes.
whatever. But
Yeah.
that's actually only in the last 5 years. I mean, well into my 50s, I definitely was still working, 10, 12 hours a day. But that's what it was. That's how that's how you do business. That's how you get known for doing what you do. And that's how you get clients, by being there for them and helping them make really good records.
Yeah, that's totally true. When you have the full passion, then you don't care about the time. You suddenly look on the watch and you see, oh, yeah, it's already 12 hours left. And when you make music or when you're really into something, finding out a sound or comparing something, then you also don't care about this time. And then I think that's one of the most important things, when you're fully dedicated to it. So
Yeah.
like when you today look on your day in the studio and you now come to the studio, do you feel like sometimes that it feels like work, or do you still have that feeling, okay, I just come here, it's like my second living room or something, or what you
This
describe?
is like, so I live really close to the studio.
Mhm.
I only live, God, I don't even know if it's 3 kilometers away. It takes me under 10 minutes to get here in traffic. So, I get in my car, I drive here. I'm the first one here every morning. I get here at like 8 in the morning. And, this is my business. This is my building. So I like water plants. I have a big, I have all kinds of plants in the studio. There's a garden outside. There's landscaping. I do all that stuff. I kind of like, take care of the studio. Then I come in my room and then I start working. I like, it's just the way I am. It's, it's a lot of dad in me, but, like, I come here, this is my other house. I take care of it. I check and make sure everything's okay. And then I start working. Then everybody else starts coming in.
It's like your safe space, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Can I tell you something? The studio, this is like a life thing. I'm going to throw it. The studio has been my safe place for all of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like everything that's bad that's going on in my life, everything that I, struggled with outside of the studio, when I come here, I can shut it off for a certain amount of time. I went through a divorce. I've got, had loss in my life. I lost friends and family. And coming here and turning on music makes it go away. It makes it go away for a little while. It gives me like it's a safe place where I can be, and I feel like I'm in control here. I'm this is my room that I know everything about. I know when I hear music in here, I know if it's right or wrong. So
Yes, because especially also like when you are in your safe space, in your room, you lock the door and you always like get the creativity from others, the emotions and the feelings. And you can be like, let's call it the painter who is like letting it shine and making something positive all the time. That's
yeah,
something when you leave the room, you made someone else happy on wherever on the other side of the world who listens to the record on his phones or in his speakers. And he feels like, wow, I hear my song in a completely new way. I never heard it before. Huh?
yeah. I mean, that's to me like people always say like, what's the like awards and, giant records, where your name's attached to, working with some of the biggest artists in the world. It's all great. I'm not going to lie. It's great. But to me, honestly, the best thing that can happen when I work on a record is that the client, the artist, the producer, the mixer tells me that that they really feel what I did. They understand what I did and it's made it better, and they appreciate what I did and understand it. To me, that's all I really want. It's just that, recognition of like, okay, I get what you did. You did exactly what I wanted, and it's perfect now. That's all I care about, is knowing that what I did was right for them.
Yeah, it's
So,
exactly this language, listen to the music and you feel like exactly what was the idea or is the idea behind it. How can you support it, and exactly go on that train, right?
yeah. It's funny too. Mastering is like one of those things, like people, a lot of people say, oh, mastering can really make or break an artist. And then there's other people who say, I don't even know what mastering is. I don't even, like, it doesn't matter to me. And I really don't care about either one of those statements. To me, it's me making the record feel better, or like have more emotion or something
Mm.
like that. And I can't explain it in the amount of stuff I do to it. It's just putting that extra stuff in there that I feel changes it enough to make it better. That's all it is, and that's all I want to do. And whether it's 99% increase or 5% increase, that's up to me to determine. And if the artist finds it better, then that's what it is. But I mean, that's all I really strive for, is having a client, the artist, the producer, tell me, like, I really heard what you did and I really understand it and I love it. So
Yeah, so
that's the win. That's the whole thing.
that's totally true. I think like when you especially go on that path, feeling the music, is there sometimes something where you would say, okay, this in my studio also gives me a creativity boost, maybe like going in your garden, like having a coffee or a snack outside, or how do you sometimes get back on the track, even when you have several projects a day?
So everybody here makes fun of me because a lot of the guys here, there's 4 studios here. There's Joe Laporta, Greg Calvi, and Randy Merrill, and me.
Hmm.
And I'm definitely I'm the most social person here. Like, I go out I go down to the offices and I talk with the assistants and I talk with the managers, and I'm in the kitchen, like getting a drink or something. Between each, different project, I like to give my ears a rest. And sometimes it's just going in the kitchen and looking through the closet for a snack. And sometimes it's going outside. I have like, kind of a avid golfer. I have like a little driving kind of range in the backyard where I can hit golf balls. Sometimes I'll just do that. I'll hit 25 golf balls and then come back inside. And it's completely cleared my head and, released some of the energy, or made me like just, fresh. Sometimes I'll go, during the summer when I have my vegetable garden here growing, I'll go like just look through the garden and see, oh, that's ready to pick. Oh, that's not, like just things like that, sitting behind the speakers all day and just blasting the music. Sometimes I feel like that's not so good because your ears are muscles. And if you go to the gym, you don't just do curls like all day, you do different workouts. So, and you don't do curls every day because your arms will be tired. So listening to music in the same spot all day at the same volume, it's probably not good for your ears. So I like to take breaks and refresh myself. I don't drink coffee anymore.
So now you're heading over to tea, or?
I don't drink tea really. I drink matcha latte every now and then, but I kind of just drink water now. It's kind of like,
Okay.
I just stopped. A year and a half ago, I changed my whole life. I became a vegan. I stopped drinking coffee. I don't really drink alcohol anymore. So, I kind of just made some health changes, and I think it's better now. When I drank coffee, I would get all like wired up, and then like a couple hours later, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. So now I feel like I'm more balanced to work, and that's, health and mental health in the studio are really important. Like, if you're not in a good place to work, maybe you shouldn't work that day until you can get into a good place. Being like, distressed or tired or angry or something, or in the middle of, something personal, you got to separate that stuff when you come in and work with somebody. And it's really hard to. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's really important that you take care of yourself as well as the artist. So You know,
Yes, because finally,
finding a rhythm in the studio is really important. You know, you have to find a way to work where you can do it and not be tired and not, jeopardize the project. So, it's
because
things to
otherwise
think about.
you get like working like a machine, and you
Yeah.
don't have any time to breathe anymore and get down, huh?
And a lot of people think like by the artists that I work with and whatever, they think like, oh, this is, you work like a machine. And I'm really the opposite of that. I really try and like take breaks and, put space in between my projects. So my ears are fresh, my thoughts are fresh. Like I think if you work, like if I'm doing a day of like 10 singles or 8 songs, different songs by different artists, it's much different than working on an album of 8 or 10 songs because they're all in that space and you're trying to keep them in that same space. But with different artists, they may all be in different spaces and you have to embrace that and give them that back. So, mentally, maybe it's time you take a break, like that kind of stuff.
Because when you have like 8 different persons, everyone works different. There's a new feeling, and you need to understand it all the time. When you have that one album, you have this one bubble. You can move around, can maybe move forward, sideways, or whatever. But
Yeah.
like new artists, I can imagine that's something, where you always have to look on the left, on the right, on the front, on the back to
I mean,
get in the right direction. Huh?
my typical day is like, 2 K-pop records, a Chinese pop record, a Japanese record, maybe 2 Latin records, and then, a couple of, alternative rock bands from like mid America, like stuff like that. Or, so my day is like globally spread out. Lately, I've been doing a lot of Indian music, so now I have that in my head, and the production styles are all different, the expectations are all different. So you really have to kind of like, space it out.
Absolutely. But that's also like super interesting when you have so many different artists, how would you describe today? I think during Corona crisis, maybe it was different, but do you have also with artists together today a lot of attendance sessions, or do they work most of the time remote and you work like with a camera setup, or what is in today's times maybe the workflow?
So before COVID, I generally had 2-3 attended sessions a week. Greg Calby had probably 4 attended sessions a week, definitely 3 to 4. Everybody else was kind of like once a week or once every 2 weeks, things like that. When COVID happened, everybody went and upped their Skype and Zoom and, all their Riverside, everybody got online and they could do that. And they also built home studios or listening, setups at home. So I feel like now a lot of artists are comfortable at home listening and maybe don't want to take a ride, get on a plane and fly to New Jersey to listen to, me master 5 songs or 10 songs, where I could do it and they just get it back and they're doing their thing. So it's definitely changed. Randy actually has people in right now. They're doing a list. Randy mastered their album yesterday. They came in today just for a couple hours to listen. So, and they came from Japan too. So I mean, they came to New York for stuff, but they came here to listen too. And it's just different. It's a different vibe. Like most people today stay home and we just send files back and forth. So it's changed. I mean, I kind of miss people. It gets a little crazy in here. Like during COVID, we're in these rooms all day and there's nobody. Like there's nobody even, we weren't even like going near each other. So, it was like we're locked away in a room. And now like, everything's back to normal, but we're still kind of locked away here in the room,
People
So
enjoy the convenience, just send it and get it back a few
yeah, I
hours
mean,
later.
for like, for people from China, Korea, South
Yeah,
America, Europe, it makes total sense. But, if you're in New York and I'm working on your record, I mean, it's half an hour and maybe an hour in dead stop traffic to get here,
for
so
sure.
like it's not, like you could come, but I just feel like everybody got lazy, with cameras and mics and, Zooms and whatever now.
Yeah,
So
that's true. That's also what we see right here. So most of the people just request stuff online, and then you talk quite fast, and then you don't have like these in between times anymore. But when you have like these attendance sessions, they are like also super interesting because then you get like to know the people also in between of the music and talk about other stuff, you know, what's your next holiday and stuff like that.
See, that's to me, that's like that was my wheelhouse. You know, like I'm a talker. I'll talk to somebody, and you know, like I like meeting people from all over the world. I like meeting people from countries I've never been to or places I've never been to, you know, to gain information about that and gain knowledge. And, you know, without people coming in anymore, it's kind of just like, here's my song. Does it sound good? What should I do in the mix? And that's all done through email. So it's kind of like, oh, you don't want to talk? Do you have kids? What's your favorite sport? What do you listen to? You know, what's your favorite food? Those are all things that, like, if you came here, we would talk about, you know? So I don't know. It's just different.
And all this time, you know, when you like work together with different artists in different genres and stuff like that, I guess in this 25 years already in Sterling, you made a lot of experiences. Was there like one wild request where you forgot that you never forget from an artist?
Oh my God. I mean, I can't, this would be the entire podcast, the requests. You know, like we've had, I actually just found I was cleaning up my room. Once a year, I like just I open all my drawers and all my storage stuff here and I just clean it out. I found notes from somebody that I kept because the request was so crazy. It was back when we made CDs. The guy wanted, the song was probably like 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and he wanted 99 ID points through the song, and each was in very specific places. And it was by seconds, and it was done by math, not by like, oh, there's a beat here or there's a word here or anything. It was literally just a mathematical equation of 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second, 9 seconds, 6 seconds. Like, and the guy explained it to me, and I was like, just whatever. But it's things like that like people used to do, like 99 identifications, ID points in a 2 minute and 45 second song.
That sounds tough.
You know, and there's nobody was go through it and play it. It didn't make sense if you did. It was just like he just wanted it counting in a weird way, like the numbers changing, like track 1, track 3, track 4. You know, like what, you know, just it's just bizarre. And then
exactly, you need to hit the one little millisecond in there, otherwise it's I don't feel it.
Yeah, I mean, people go on like. You know, it's funny when I do sessions over the phone, you know, through email or whatever, I pretty much do it and then it bounces off of them for feedback. When people are in the studio, you get instantaneous feedback by just looking at their face. If they're like closing eyes and they're moving, you're like, okay, that's good. If they're like this, you know, then it's like, or if they're like, you know, then you know something's off.
Yeah.
So I don't have that luxury when they're not here, you know, like instant feedback is good. But then, you know, consequentially, people are like, hey, it doesn't sound like this in my studio. And it's like, well, this studio is kind of like a real studio and set up. You know, like we spent a lot of money building these rooms with really, you know, good equipment and like one of the best studio builders in the world. And the rooms look and feel and sound like a real studio. So, you know, when people say it doesn't sound like that in my bedroom with my, you know, Genelex, I'm like, okay, well, you know, you have a bedroom and this is a studio. So
yes.
But you also have to take that into consideration too, that they're used to that, and you have to try and understand what they heard in their bedroom as opposed to what they hear here, and you have to decipher that and come up with something to fix it.
Yeah, because most of the people, they maybe just listen the music on their one single speaker. Yeah, and what everybody has today is like the little like boombox speakers. When you like 5 meters away, you just hear mono. You know, no stereo anymore, and people compare the music on it, right?
I know. A quick funny story is my son lives in one of my kids lives in Los Angeles, and he's a producer, artist, and he moved into a new apartment a couple months ago, and he, you know, him and his roommates are all artists and producers, and he set up a studio in his bedroom, and you know, he's like, hey, I'm having trouble with this. And I was like, maybe you need a diffuser, maybe you need a bass trap. You should get these things. And he's like, oh, I know somebody has bass traps and they want to get rid of them. So he went out and he put it all together. And then I'm like, okay, send me some mixes and I'll listen and I'll tell you where you are. You know, not enough bass, too much bass, whatever. So he starts sending me the mixes and I'm like, okay, they're sounding pretty good. You know, maybe they're too thin. So let's try this. And we got to the point where it sounded really good, like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, wow, your mixes are like coming in really good. I'm not doing a lot to it. And then the other day, maybe it was yesterday, I called him and he's like, show me on his phone, look what I did, look what I did. And I was like, what'd you do? He's like, I moved my studio around. I made my bedroom different. He goes, I'm having people in here and there's not enough room to work. And I was like, it's not about convenience. It's about the sound. What are you doing? And he's like, oh yeah, I got to fix that again. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
He
this
was literally rearranged everything for convenience because he was having like a full band in his bedroom. And I was like, oh my God, you can't do that. You got to keep it tight. We finally got the room dialed in tight and you moved it all.
that's lately I had one issue, when I had a cable down here at my desk and I pulled it a little bit too hard so that my speaker was moving like half millimeter, and I was sitting here. I felt like, okay, something is wrong with my right ear. And even like shaping the sound and doing stuff, it can make
And
completely
you
new
change it and
decisions
it's
and
right.
wrong decisions as well.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's this, your listening environment is the most important and most underrated
Yeah.
thing in mixing and mastering, in music production. A lot of people just say, oh, I'm just going to track with these speakers here and whatever, the mixer will fix everything. And now you have all these sounds that aren't right that now the mixer has to deal with. And then the mixer gets everything and then it's like, okay, I really couldn't fix that or whatever. Or if you mix it somewhere not so good, then it's like, oh, they'll fix that in mastering. And it's like, okay, well, if the master engineer doesn't have a studio that sounds really good, none of it's ever getting fixed. So
It's just
listening
shifting it.
environment is listening environment is to me the most important piece of equipment. The speakers, the room, the whole thing. It's not, what computer you have, it's not what outboard gear you have, it's none of that. It's everything together. You know what I'm saying? Individually, it all means nothing. Combined, it means everything. So you have to have a room, you have to have an environment, you have to have a safe space that you trust and you know is right. And that's the thing about Sterling Sound that a lot of people don't understand is that we're not just a studio here with a bunch of guys mastering. We're a facility designed to play back music at the best possible way, to make it to hear it the truest, realest way, so that when you listen to it on other systems, it translates to all those other systems and really sounds good.
Yeah,
That's
that's absolutely the case because so many people are out there with marketing of plugins. This plugin will fix now everything, but finally they should focus completely on their setup. Even when they have like $300 speakers, they can sound amazing when you have a good room. They can sound better than 10K speakers in like a bad treated room. Finally, yeah.
Well, the funny thing too is that so many people, it's basically life. The more money it is, the better it is.
Yeah.
Not the case. Absolutely not the case. My first studio that I built, that like when I got my first real studio at Frankfurt Wayne, with Herb and Tom, the owner said, we're going to build you a studio. And I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. And my studio I thought we were going to buy equipment and put it in. We took all the scrap stuff that nobody wanted in any of the other studios and built my studio with it. And I was like, all right, it's not what I was dreaming of, but I'll get through. So I had like, Yuri 813 monitors, which they don't even exist anymore. And it was like a coaxial cone with a tweeter and it was like just two coaxial speakers. No tweeter, no mid-range, no bass, just all together in one speaker. And they were hung from the ceiling on mounts. And my EQ was a Technics 10-band graphic equalizer, stereo equalizer. Technics. That's like a home stereo thing. And then I had like a CBS limiter. It was old, it was okay sounding. But with that equipment, I made some really good sounding records because the room sounded right and everything was balanced and aligned right. So I got some pretty good sounding records out of that room. And then as my career progressed, I, built better rooms and better equipment and better everything, but not necessarily more expensive, just stuff that really, like the build was more expensive because it was done better. It was aligned better. It had better engineers building the room, better craftsmen building the room.
Yeah,
So
that's a completely own environment, and designing a
Yeah.
room, finding like standing waves and stuff like that, the best sitting and listening position. That's absolutely crazy, because also a friend of mine, he built a studio, and I was listening in his studio afterwards, and it's crazy, even like when you do the phase alignment finally between the speakers, then you have exactly the right listening position, and suddenly you feel like, okay, there's no like covering of sounds anymore, and it's crystal clear, and then you can use whatever you want. You will do a right decision because you hear the right thing, and that's absolutely crazy. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's also one of the things that most people like struggle with. And do you also, like, when you have like your studio and your listening room, is something where you would say, okay, there was maybe a one super tough technical problem maybe you was once like working with, or you had as an issue, maybe like that the speaker broke, there was like the main speaker or something like that, or
Oh, I've had speakers break. I had quickly one time when I was at the Hit Factory. I guess it was like a whole bunch of guys. It was Diddy, Busta Rhymes, Nas, and somebody else asked me if they could come over and listen to something on my speakers. And I was like, yeah, all right, come over. And they come in the studio and they're playing like a DAT, and they're blasting it. So I'm like, just don't turn the knob past this mark. And I put a piece of tape on there saying it doesn't go past here. And I walked out of the room because they were playing so loud. And 10 minutes goes by and they all come walking out of my room, and Diddy's like, yo, something's fucked up. And Busta's like, yo, your speakers are like smoking. And then they all just walk out, and I walk in there, and they blew two of my drivers in my speakers. And they were
wow.
Dynaudio M3s. And I was just like, you motherfuckers. Like, you guys just blew. I told you not to go past there, and you went past there, and you blew my speakers. And I was out of work for like, God, I couldn't work for a day because we didn't have two drivers. We had to have them like FedEx to us right away. So the next day they came, but it was like,
Yeah, and hopefully they sound the same afterwards, right? So
Well,
with
yeah, that's the other thing too. I mean, they did sound the same, but you're always worried about that, when you're replacing something. Thank God I haven't replaced the driver in over a decade, a couple decades, but
yeah, but maybe you use like maybe one song to calibrate the speakers and your ears again. Do you have maybe one song where you actually say, okay, when I put on this track, then I know exactly how these speakers sound? Do you have something like that?
I have like I have a flash drive that I bring if I'm going to listen to speakers. I'll bring a flash drive, or my phone. Now I have a bunch of files on, um, and I'll listen to songs in other places if I'm checking somebody's system out or whatever. But for me, like, I have a couple songs that I just know how they feel. I just know exactly where they should sit, and I play them. And it's not the same songs all the time. It's just like what's ever in my head at the time, or whatever, like it's just whatever I think sounds really good at the time, and I'll use it because it's sitting fresh with me, and I'll know right away, like, okay, this is sounding right or it's not.
Yeah, it's
We
getting
went through here. Everybody kind of, the Northwood Acoustics did these rooms, and everybody loved the setup right away. But over like maybe the first 2 years, we were kind of like, should I move forward? Should I move the console back? Should I trim the bass? Should I do this? And it was, it took everybody a minute to get dialed in, but now everybody's, completely dialed in,
yeah, sometimes exactly these smallest things that can make the huge difference finally. Yeah, and
Yeah.
but finally it's also like when you have speakers, also like when you decide for studio speakers, the one goes like with the ADCs, the one goes with the Genelec or whatever, and you can have 5 people in a room that is perfectly measured, and you listen to the speakers, and 5 people will maybe take a different decision just because of matter of taste, because on this speakers I feel the music because it sounds like how I usually used to hear music. Huh?
Yeah. No, speakers are like people always ask me, oh, what's the best speaker? You must know. And I'm like, there is no best speaker. It's whatever. I mean, there's good speakers, but the best speaker is a very personal thing. Like if you like Genelecs and you are mixing really good records, I'm not going to tell you to get different speakers because you're making a really good product. You know, you're making something that sounds good and you're comfortable doing it. So why would I tell you to change? And that's the thing I tell most people is like when you go out and you want to build a home studio or a studio, you should listen to a lot of speakers, not just a couple. You should listen to a lot of speakers till you find one that you're like, this one resonates with me. Like as soon as you put it on, you like react like, oh my God, like I hear and feel everything. That's what you should get. That's the reaction you should have when you are demoing speakers. Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, that's, you know,
Because that's the stuff you spend most of
it's
the
the
time
magic,
on.
man. That's when, that's
12
what it,
hours you need to like it.
but that you need to love it. Like the more you like it, the more you're going to be into the work and the better you're going to work. You're going to hear things that you didn't hear on the other speakers.
Yes.
So it's really cracking that code and figuring out what speakers work. Now, these rooms here, all Northwood rooms come with ATC speakers because he does, you know, part of his design is tested with these speakers. So it makes sense that the speakers work. And I mean, ATC is an amazing speaker. It's definitely one of the best speakers made. Do I think it's the best? Maybe, you know, it depends where I hear it, you know? And that's what really matters. It's like I've been to studios where I've heard Augsburgers sound, I wouldn't say amazing, I'd say good. And then I've been to studios where I've heard Augsburgers sound like shit. I've been to studios where I've heard Genelecs sound amazing, and then other places where they sound like shit. So it's, you know, it's like, it's not something that's going to be consistent in the real world. I mean, outside of Northwood rooms, you should be able to go into a Northwood room and pretty much hear the same sound in all the Northwood rooms because the design and the, you know, the plans and everything are the same for all the rooms. It just expands on the size of the room, but the whole design and everything should be the same. So, you know, the Northwood's kind of a different thing, you know.
That's finally like everything together, right? As you said, you know, it's like the room, the speakers, the setup, you know, the measurement inside of the room. And once when you don't have like a room that is like, you know, exactly fitting the speakers and you put some speakers in your home studio, you need to figure out, okay, how can you let them shine and finally get them in the right position and angle. And but first you need to like them, you know, even when you're sitting like somewhere in a shop, you know, listen to them, maybe in a kind of good acoustic treated room, but you know, it really depends how they are, you know, in position, you know, is there a good phase alignment? But finally, you can still feel it. You know, when you switch on the Genelecs and ADCs, you already feel like, okay, yeah, I can hear a kind of vibe with these speakers and that speakers, and then you decide which one is your vibe, right? And
I mean, yeah, and if you think about it, like all the gear that's in here, everything, the plugins, the computers, they're all just pieces, like links in the entire thing. But the one thing that you use all the time are the speakers. You know, like I can do you know, 10 sessions in a day and not use the same plugin on all 10 sessions. There's that many plugins. But I'm using the speakers on every single session. You know what I'm saying? So that's, to me, the most important thing. The speakers, the room, the entire setup, you know?
So finally, like that's the thing you can't work without, right? The speakers and your room, right? Everything else, whatever compressor or plugin, whatever you have, you can maybe find something else, but the room is the base, right?
Yeah, it's really the base of everything, you know? And I mean, there's, you know, I don't know what else is there, you know, in the room that's consistent. It's the speakers.
Yeah.
You know, so it's one of those things. It's under, you know, people don't talk about it enough, and I think it's really important. You know, that you're confident in what you're listening to, and you know what you're listening to is right or wrong. That's recording, mixing, anything, mastering. That's the basis of what's going to happen during all that.
Like maybe also like a funny question, like when you went into your Northwood room, did you then you of course I guess you did it, you know, you listened maybe to some older records. Have you ever felt like, oh shit, I would love to have changed this one a little bit different while listening to
All
that?
the
Or do you
time.
ever
It doesn't even have to be like in a new room. I could be like, I could have done a record last year in this room, and then a year later hear it and go, oh man, I really feel like I should have added more top to that or something. You know, it's a never ending. You know, you're chasing the dragon the whole time. I'm never satisfied. You know, even when people are like, oh, that sounds so good, I'll be like, maybe I could make it better.
maybe something that is super interesting for the aspiring mixing and mastering engineers today? What advice would you like give to these young artists or sound engineers who want to, you know, have success or go forward in the career of a sound engineer?
I mean, honestly, it's like, don't have a plan B. If you really want to do this, put everything you can into it. You can't say, oh, I want to do it, and then, you know, like, oh, but I'll do this in case it doesn't work out or whatever. You have to you have to put everything into this to be successful in this business. It's not for like this business is not for kids. It's, you know, it's very competitive. Um, you know, I look at like, you know, the four you know, categories: film, music, you know, the Grammys, the Emmys, the Oscars, and the Tonys. All those, you know, stage, screen, television, and music all have, you know, it's competitive. You know, there's people all over the globe that want to do it. You know, in every country has basically their version of Hollywood. Every country has their version of, you know, Music Row or, you know, whatever. So, you really have to be in it, and you have to put everything you can into it, and, you know, not give up. You know, you also have to plan on it too. Like, you know, you can't be like struggling financially and everything and plan on doing something where you may struggle financially. You know, you have to save money, put money aside, and be able to say like, okay, if I'm not going to get paid a lot for a year, I have enough money to pay rent or do whatever. I mean, I lived at home until I was 20, you know, because my parents were like, you're going to get in the music business, you're an idiot, this is stupid. So I saved as much money as I could, and then I moved out. And, you know, like I said, I lived in a cheap place. I lived above a gas station, you know. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
but that's exactly
it's
it, you
just
know.
you got to do what you got to do. You got to figure your life out before you get into this. You got to have a little, you know, security blanket, but no plan B.
Yeah. So 150% plan A, you know, just have your one view on that dream and the path you want to go. And I think that's the toughest thing, you know, to like have this little burden in the beginning and then start like progressing and like get the right path. And yeah, that's like the passion you need to follow up. And we see it, Chris, you know,
Yeah,
you never gave
yeah,
up, like slept in studios and like 150% like for years. And you see, guys, that's how you need to do it, you know, straightforward, you know, never give up, always keep your goal in front of you and keep continuing. So, Chris, thank you so much for
yeah.
being in that podcast and sharing all your life and stories and studio stuff and the most important things right here. And yeah, then I would say speak soon and thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great.